coming up. Okay. So welcome. This is Matthew 21, 24 to 27, authoritative lack of restraint. We're going to start a series after all our Christmas topics, and we'll intersperse a few other topics as we go through, but it's essentially Matthew 21. And we're going to start here with the authoritative lack of restraint. We're going to work through the desire of the father, the householder, the chaff and wheat, the stone-grown powder, the rejected cornerstone, and then the parable of the wedding feast and the election callings of the chosen elect. We've done some of that. Now, when you hear these topics in a sermon, you'll usually hear bits and pieces, and they'll make up stuff for each of the little parts. As I've been going through and looking this in great detail as to the words that were changed and what the Greek says, these appear to all be related, just like we found in the Sermon on the Mount. There are all these little connections. This is the triumphal entry. So Easter is early this year, in early April. So by the time we get through this sequence, we'll come back, and there's some interesting things of Jesus coming in on the donkey, where they have to mistranslate certain things and make certain things work, and then they give you this story. So we're going to see if there's another reason in addition that might fit what happened there. So today we're on this authoritative lack of restraint, and I'll remind you about the fig tree after we get through this. And instead of telling you, I think the triumphal entry means this, we're going to go look at all the other parts and then come back and then I can review all the parts we've covered. That way you'll see it instead of me just telling you. I think you'll see this when we get further along. Let's review that fig tree. We covered that. This is the paraphrase. And in the morning, as Jesus returned to the city, the disciples decided later that he must have been hungry. Get all these sermons on hungry. They thought he was hungry. He never ate anything. He didn't eat anything after. It's a lesson. And when Jesus saw one fig tree in the way, he said to the fig tree, "Let no fruit grow on thee from now on." Immediately the fig tree dried up. The disciples saw it. They wondered, saying, "How quickly is the fig tree dried up?" And here Jesus says, "Verily I say unto you," connect the dots with this fig tree drying up, "if you believe and do not discern, you will not only do what has been done to this fig tree, but in addition, if you say to this mountain or definition, be lifted up and cast into oblivion in the sea of humanity, it will come into being." This is going to happen a few hundred years later with the leaven mixed in with the true doctrine. And then we have, "In all these not good things, if you request them as a wish, persuaded, you shall take and seize them," where the take and seize is not necessarily good. At some point I should do a lesson on prayer verses. "And all things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing, you shall receive." And like this morning, you'll say, "and all means everything." Well, no, in Greek, all meant all in the context. And we're going to see that in a few minutes. That's with the people. When they go out after the Last Supper, Jesus says, "All you will be deceived." Well, is he talking about the whole universe, the whole world, everyone? No, he's talking about the 11 disciples with him. So, "and all whatsoever you shall ask in prayer." Prayer is a wish you put forward. Believing means you are persuaded. You shall take. You shall seize. And so some of this gets converted into things that I'm not sure it means that. That does not mean you shouldn't pray. It doesn't mean Jesus doesn't answer prayer. It just means some of these verses were kind of changed to make it a little different. Okay, here's our lesson for today, Matthew 21. And when he was, remember, he just upset the money changers. They're walking on their way the next day over the Mount of Olives. He's telling about the fig tree. And now they're at the temple. "And when he was come into the temple, the chief priests and elders of the people came unto him as he was teaching, and said, By what authority dost thou do these things? And who gave thee this authority? And Jesus answered and said to them, I also will ask you one thing, which if ye tell me, I in likewise will tell you by what authority I do these things. Then he says, the baptism of John, whence was it? From heaven or of men? And they reasoned among themselves, saying, If we shall say from heaven, he will say unto us, Why did ye not then believe him? But if we shall say of men, we fear the people, for all hold God as a prophet. And they answered, We cannot tell. And he said, Neither do I tell you by what authority I do these things. And I'm still getting used to changing the slides here, so sometimes I forget. Okay, so I was reading that to you. Going to another verse, Matthew 15, And in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. He's teaching, right? And they say, By what authority do you do this? And I've heard sermons, and they make a big distinction of doctrines and teachings. If you look at the Greek, it's the same word. But in the King James, they didn't like to use the same word, so they had to come up with another word. It's actually, they teach the teachings. And in Greek, they teach the teaching. In German, they teach the teaching. In German, lernen is learn and lehren is teach. And that's why my dad would say sometimes, and you hear in Pennsylvania Dutch, the teacher did not learn me much. Did not teach me. Teacher did not learn me to learn. And my wife does not like that. And so once in a while, I'll say that. But here we have the teaching for teachings. So we don't want to make too much of the fact it's doctrine. And there we have it. He was teaching as a master, teaching. What was he teaching? Can we infer what he was teaching by the question he was asked? And will Jesus return to what he's teaching? Or are all these things going to be connected? He's going to return to whatever he was saying that annoyed them. Now, the chief priests and elders, by what authority dost thou do these things? Now, what does this mean, authority? Did they think he had a lot of authority? When I looked this up in the Cambridge Greek lexicon, exousia literally means out of your substance. Ousia means substance, and that was a big debate in the 200 years later what was the substance of Jesus? And they debated that, got upset at each other. Possibility, opportunity, license, lack of restraint, liberty. Power or authority if you're a ruler or official. Was Jesus a ruler or official? Position of power. Capability, resources of the state, availability of supplies. Show of wealth and power. It appears, if we use the Cambridge Greek lexicon, big thick book, it doesn't mean quite authority. In fact, the Strong's developed this concordance in the late 1800s. They've refined that a little bit. Some people say the others are better, but I use Strong's because it's freely available. I can just work with it electronically through the computer. And what Strong's does, and others, when they define these terms, is they give the original Greek definition, and you can see it there. Ability, privilege, competency, freedom. Then they keep going until they get the word they want. Authority. Oh, it means authority. And so they'll do that a lot, and I look at that. I'm not sure what that means. Now, to give you an example of exousia, that is lack of restraint, suppose I started telling some really good jokes, or bad jokes, depending upon your point of view. Now, if I kept telling those jokes over and over again, would you say I have power? Would you say I have authority? Or would you say I have a lack of restraint? Yeah, and it's clear. What did they mean, Jesus? Who gave you this lack of restraint? You're supposed to keep in line, not rock the boat. You're not supposed to be saying all this stuff about us and teaching people these things. Who gave you this lack of restraint? You see how that kind of fits a little better? They're not recognizing he has power. They're not recognizing he's a ruler. Yeah. I mean, to give you an example, some people dislike my jokes so much they're ready to strangle me. And I guess the choke would then be on me, right? Choke would be on me. And my chokes need to hang together or they will all hang separately. If they do not, then no noose is good news. If they smell bad, then all would be skeptically hang around septically, without exception. That was a real life example of a lack of restraint. If I had, so in other words, that's what that word appears to mean when we see it. Now, John Dahlberg Acton, this is late 1800s, he wrote a letter, said, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men. And the question that comes up logically is, did the power corrupt them, or were they already corrupt and just waiting for the opportunity to do it? You know, that's what Augustine says about the innocence of babies. Oh, those babies are so innocent. And he pointed out, well, they get mad, and the only reason they're not doing bad things is they don't have the ability to do it yet. They just scream and move their, but they'll do it as soon as they get older. So some parents think, oh, I was a bad parent. I was a good one if they turned out good. I was a bad parent. They didn't. Well, some of those kids might already have that in them from the DNA. We don't know. Yeah. Are all balls are red or blue? In a very dark room, what color is a bright red ball? You don't know, do you? What happens when the light is turned on? You know which one it is. How do we know who's corrupt and who's not? Well, when we turn the light on and we give them that ability to do it, and they use that lack of a restraint, yeah, that lets us know. So Jesus answered and said unto them, I will ask you one thing. Now the thing is logic. I will ask you a reasoning. So in the next verse it said they reasoned among themselves. Oh, they were trying to reason. Well, Jesus said, give me a reasoning. So when he said a reasoning, they're going to reason among themselves, right? So it's not necessarily a bad thing. He said, give me a reason. They translated thing here. I will tell you by what authority, lack of restraint, I do these. And they always add the things, but it's just these, whatever they were talking about. Yeah, that lack of restraint. Now, there are two important points here. I'll mention them in the Greek, but it comes through in the English. You see this word, it's apokrithis, means answered. It almost always means answered. Because next week we're going to have some important verses, and the two children are going to answer. Each is going to answer, but you ask yourself, okay, where's the question? So whenever you see the word answer, you say, oh, what's the question? And sometimes they don't show you. We had that in at the Olivet Discourse where they just avoid the whole word. The other is it says kago logo, kago, and I am. It's the word ego, which ego means I, right? And so ego means I am, and we'll see it always needs another verb, and we'll get to that here. Yeah. So I'm going to skip that part. We'll skip that. Being in the birdhouse. So Jesus answers. So we have that kago, I am. And whenever you say that, you need a verb to go with it. Erotiso, ero. So I will say, I will go. And all the ego or I does is it adds emphasis. And if you've studied Spanish or French or even German, you can say the I part just by giving the verb because the inflection tells you what it is. But in all those languages, you can add the I to make it emphatic. So those are the two important things from this week from the word point of view. Because in those next verses, we're going to have the ego without a verb, and they're going to put a verb in for you. That verb doesn't fit. And then we're going to have two answers, and where's the question? So I'm just setting that up for next week. The baptism of John, where was it from? From heaven or of men? And they reasoned among themselves. And the reasoning isn't bad because he just said, give me some reasoning. But that word got changed to thing. Saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, why did you not believe him? Yeah. Now, Jesus only uses that word baptism a few times. Go ye therefore and teach all nations. You got to learn them something. Baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. That baptizing means dunking, immersing, getting fully in. So you're supposed to teach them and get them fully immersed in what you're teaching. But this got changed. Oh, we're going to sprinkle them. We're going to put them in the water. But it has a deeper meaning that you're supposed to get immersed in what that teaching is. Winston Churchill said, personally, I'm always ready to learn, although I do not always like being taught. Anyone else like that out there? Yeah, I like to learn, not necessarily how the teacher's doing it. I'd rather learn my way. Some teachers don't like if you do that, I found out. Yeah. But if we say of men, we fear the people, for they hold John as a prophet. Uh, okay, it could be partly from heaven, partly from men. Was Jesus man or God, or a combination? Was Jesus fully man, fully God, or was he fully man and fully God? Now we had those issues in our on a stream I did on the Christmas carols and then some other things. Oh, last week. We have these songs coming in early on in the 2nd, 3rd century, promoting different views. Arius had one promoting that he's man or God. We praise him as without beginning because of him who has a beginning, and adore him as everlasting because of him who in time has come to be. That was supposed to be heresy. So what Ambrose did is he came up with his own songs. And laud to God the Father be, all praise eternal Son to thee, all glory as is ever meet to God the Holy Paraclete. And so there, we have these songs going back and forth, each trying to sway you as to what you should think. Ambrose is the one that Augustine reports said, when in Rome, do what Rome does. You ever heard that saying? Because Augustine asked Ambrose, well, when I'm in Ravenna, the other capital, they want me to do communion this way. When I'm in Rome, they want me to do it this way, as if it's important. What do you do? And he says, well, when I'm there, I do it the way they do it. When I'm here, I do it the way they do it in Rome. And that's where that saying came from. Okay. Yeah. So where was it from? And if you ever studied computing or logic, we have these conditionals. If you do this, if yes, you do this, if not, you do that. And their reasoning, if we say this, he'll say that. If we do say that, he'll say that. And that's part of logic and reasoning, and it gets very detailed, and I'm going to skip the details on there. There are all sorts of things that you get into computing that sometimes in sermons you hear conditionals, and they simplify it a little too much. And they answered Jesus and said, we cannot tell. And he said unto them. Now here we have a play on words, ephialtes and ephialtes. Very similar. One means nightmare. Now, it's not clear that Matthew knows that this is a word is a play on words. It's used by Jesus in the parable of the weeds. And they say, oh, and he said to them, an enemy hath done this. Oh, nightmare, an enemy hath done this. So Jesus is using it as a play on words. But Matthew's just using it as he appears to be learning, and I've noticed in different places what Matthew fills in are some of the words that Jesus uses. So if he's using a word, he'll use it somewhere else too. So one way to think about that is Matthew often uses words that Jesus uses elsewhere. Do you know that's how children learn many words from their parents? They also learn from TV and so forth, and children swear by that technique, right? They swear, and they learn these swear words on TV. They learn it from their parents. And then the parents say, oh, isn't that cute? I wonder where they learned that from. I'm wondering where that came from. And they answered Jesus, we cannot tell. So he said to them, nightmare, neither tell I by what authority, lack of restraint, I do these things. Jesus says he's not going to tell them. You know, most sermons end at that point, and they say, oh, Jesus doesn't tell them. Does Jesus, in fact, tell them? To find out, you're going to have to read the next passages, right? Connect the dots and determine, does Jesus actually tell them by what lack of restraint or authority he does that? And I can tell you there's not one shred of evidence that Jesus answers this question in the following verses. There's not one shred. Remember the one cookie rule? There's a whole lot of evidences. There's not one. And so we have that if then else. They're doing that, deciding between if then and else's. So I wanted to give a little story here. This is from a Penn State programming class from the 1980s when I was teaching programming. I think it was an engineering programming because we did business and we had engineers and they had Fortran or whatever. somewhere in Buki building. I think Hammond building was where the engineers, some of that engineers, that was a long walk from East Halls. So we're having a test, conditional, if then else. Student, will this conditional programming question be on the next test, which was on conditional programming? Teacher, that's me. I did not put questions on the test we have not covered. Student later admits they stopped listening at this point. Teacher, but that's a good question. Let's cover it. So I went through the whole question in full detail. Later, I needed one more question for that test. Well, we covered it. I put it on the test. The student later on at the end of the semester on their customer satisfaction survey called a student evaluation said, the teacher lied to us. He said a question would not be on the test, and it was on the test. Do you see the logic there? They weren't thinking through, right? Is Jesus a good teacher? Are you a good learner? Is Jesus going to learn you anything? Right? And the state changes. So that's what we want to look at. And so the question there, and Jesus said to them, neither do I tell you by what authority, lack of restraint, I do these things. That's a good question. Let me now answer that. So he's not telling them then, but you have to look, well, does he answer it later? And that's what we're going to look at because it seems like he does. So this is what we're going to do next week. But what think ye? A man had 2 sons, and he came to the first and said, son, go work today in the vineyard. Doesn't say my at the end. We'll find out those sons is a word for children. He had 2 children, not 2 sons. It's always translated children except a few places. And he answered and said, the first, I will not. But afterwards he repented and went. And he came to the second and likewise. And he answered and said, I go, sir, and went not. You see those 2 answered? Where's the question? We have to figure that out. The other thing is the Textus Receptus switches those, though so does the NIV, even though they base their translation on the Greek that I've been using, pretty much. And you see the first son says, I go, sir, right? Remember I said that ego, I am, it needs a verb with it. There's no verb there. He just says, I am Lord. Which of the 2 did the will of the Father? And that will is the desire, the first. Actually, it's the latter one because they switched the order. Verily I say unto you, that the publicans and harlots go into the kingdom of God before you. Remember that verily I say unto you, the way it's worded, it means connect the dots, connect what I just said with the next one. So we have to figure out what the first one said, and then we have to connect the dots. Is it more important what you think, what you say, or what you do? And might this help answer the question, was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? From man? By what authority or lack of restraint does Jesus do these things? And we're going to find this, and then this is a short 2 or 3 verse one with a connection. Then we're going to have the householder. There was a householder, planted a vineyard, so forth. When the Lord of therefore the vineyard come, and what will he do unto these husbandmen? He will miserably destroy these wicked men, or these badly bad will be destroyed. They don't want to use bad there twice. And will let out his vineyard to other husbands who shall render him the fruit of their seasons. So we're going to look at that. And usually God's taken as the householder. Can we say God was a householder? Or Jesus' God was a house? That means at some point they're not, right? Didn't have a beginning, weren't there? This is going to be a tip-off, and then we'll go through all these words and say, this isn't talking about what we're usually talking about. Because the householder doesn't put hedges and walls in. They don't build towers, ivory towers and so forth. They don't dig in the sand to get rocks and so forth to build their towers. They're talking about someone else. So that's what's upcoming. Today we looked at that authoritative lack of restraint. That is, by what lack of restraint does Jesus do the things he does? He says he's not going to tell them. then what does he do? It appears he's going to tell us in the way I mentioned. He said, I'm not going to tell you. And then he goes through, and you have to pick out and connect the dots and say, oh, yes, that does indicate that he does have this authority. He does have this lack of restraint. And when Jesus is talking about it, it could mean he is the power, the ruler, and using that authority. So that's what we have to look forward to next week and the next